There are warnings in your life right now, signs you've probably noticed but didn't take seriously, not because you're careless, but because no one ever told you what they actually mean. You felt something was off. You noticed patterns repeating. You sensed that certain things didn't make sense. But you explained it away. You told yourself it was stress, bad timing, coincidence. I understand that because I used to rely on that exact reaction. There was a time when I operated on the other side of this reality. In places where patterns were not accidental, they were observed, studied, and sometimes influenced. And one thing we understood very clearly was this: people ignore warning signs when they don't recognize them. So instead of obvious disruption, what shows up are subtle indicators, small shifts, repeating situations, internal pressure that doesn't seem to have a clear source. And because those signs don't look dramatic, they get dismissed. But what looks small is often intentional. I've seen people stay in cycles for years, not because they lacked effort, not because they weren't trying, but because they kept overlooking the signals that something deeper was happening. Signals that, if recognized early, could have changed everything. That's why this message is important, because today I'm going to show you 6 specific signs that should never be ignored. Not guesses, not theories, but patterns I've seen repeatedly, patterns that reveal when something is influencing your direction, your clarity, and even your progress. And here's the truth: ignoring these signs doesn't make them go away, it allows them to continue. So as you listen, don't just hear this as information. Pay attention, because some of these signs may already be showing up in your life. And if they are, then this is not random. This is your moment to recognize what you've been overlooking and finally understand what's been happening behind the scenes. The first sign you should never ignore is the pattern of almost. This one is subtle. It doesn't look dangerous at first. In fact, it can even feel encouraging because things seem to be moving, but they never fully arrive. You get close to opportunities, but they fall through at the last moment. You make progress, but something interrupts it just before completion. You see results starting, but they never stabilize. It's always almost. Almost successful, almost stable, almost through. And over time, this becomes your normal. You start saying things like, at least I'm getting somewhere, or maybe next time it will work. But what you don't realize is that this pattern is not random progression, it's controlled limitation. When I was on the other side, this was one of the most effective strategies used. Not to stop someone completely, that would be obvious, but to keep them in a loop where they never fully break through, because almost keeps you hopeful without ever letting you arrive, and hope without arrival creates exhaustion. You begin to question yourself. You begin to wonder what you're doing wrong. You begin to lower your expectations without realizing it. And that's where the pattern gains strength, because once you accept almost as normal, you stop expecting completion. Now, here's how you know this is happening in your life. Look at your recent experiences. Are there situations where things consistently fall apart at the final stage? Do you find yourself restarting processes you should have already completed Do opportunities seem real until the very last moment? If this is a pattern, not a one time event, but something that repeats, then this is a sign, and it should not be ignored, because anything that repeats has structure, and anything with structure can be confronted, but only if you recognize it first. This is why awareness is so important, because once you see the pattern clearly, you stop calling it coincidence. You stop explaining it away, and you start addressing it with intention. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the second sign, one that operates internally, not externally, and is even more dangerous because most people don't realize it's happening at all. The second sign you should never ignore is something that doesn't show up in your circumstances first. It shows up inside you: a sudden, unexplained heaviness, a loss of motivation that doesn't match your situation. You wake up tired even after resting. You feel drained even when you haven't done much. You lose interest in things that once mattered to you. And the strange part is you can't fully explain it. There's no clear reason, no major event, no obvious cause, but the feeling is consistent. Now, most people will dismiss this quickly. They'll say, I'm just tired, or I need a break, or maybe I'm just not feeling it today. And yes, sometimes that's true. But when this becomes a pattern, when it shows up repeatedly, especially when you're about to make progress, it becomes a sign. When I was on the other side, this was one of the most effective internal strategies. Because if your energy drops, your actions slow down. If your motivation disappears, your consistency breaks. And if your consistency breaks, your progress stops without anything external needing to interfere. Think about that. No blocked doors, no visible obstacles, just internal resistance. And that's what makes this so dangerous. Because you don't fight what you don't recognize. You think it's you. You think you're being lazy. You think you've lost discipline. You think something is wrong with your mindset. But in many cases, it's pressure. Pressure designed to disconnect you from momentum. Now, here's how you identify this sign clearly. It often appears right before something important, right before you take action, right before you make a decision, right before something begins to move. Suddenly, you don't feel like doing it anymore. You delay, you postpone, you lose focus. And just like that, the moment passes, not because it wasn't real, but because you didn't engage it. And over time, this creates a cycle of missed opportunities that feels like bad timing, but is actually consistent interruption. So if you've been experiencing this kind of heaviness, this unexplained loss of drive, don't ignore it. Don't immediately accept it as normal, because awareness changes how you respond. Instead of agreeing with it, you confront it. Instead of slowing down, you move anyway. Because once you push through that resistance consistently, it begins to lose its control. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the third sign, one that involves the people around you and can influence your direction without you even realizing it. The third sign you should never ignore is a sudden, unexplained shift in the people around you. Now, this one is tricky because on the surface, it looks normal. People change, conversations slow down, relationships evolve. That's part of life. But this is different. This is when connections that once felt stable begin to shift without a clear reason. People who supported you become distant. Communication that was consistent becomes irregular. Opportunities tied to certain relationships suddenly go quiet. And the timing feels off. It happens right when you're about to move forward. Right when something is starting to align. Right when progress feels close. And suddenly, silence. Now, most people respond emotionally to this. They chase the connection. They overthink the situation. They try to fix something that doesn't make sense. But what they don't realize is that not every shift is meant to be chased. Some shifts are signals. When I was on the other side, we understood how powerful influence through connection could be. Because sometimes progress is not blocked directly, it's redirected through people. A delayed response, a missed introduction, a broken connection, small things that seem normal, but when they repeat, they begin to shape your path. And if you're not aware, you follow that redirection without questioning it. Now, here's how you recognize this sign clearly. It's not just one person, it's a pattern. Multiple connections begin to shift at once. Communication slows down across different areas. Things that once felt easy suddenly require effort. And the biggest indicator, you feel like you're being pulled away from something, but you can't explain why. That's when you need to pause, not react. Pause. Because awareness in this moment is more important than action. Instead of chasing what's pulling away, ask yourself, is this clearing space? Is this redirecting me? Or is this something I need to confront? Because not every closed door is a loss, and not every silence is rejection. Sometimes it's separation. Separation from what cannot go with you into the next stage. But here's the danger. If you don't recognize the difference, you might hold on to what's leaving and miss what's trying to align. So don't ignore sudden shifts in people. Observe them. Don't react immediately. Understand them. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you won't be controlled by it. You'll move with awareness instead of confusion. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the fourth sign, one that affects your environment and circumstances directly and often appears as repeated disruption when you're trying to focus or move forward. The fourth sign you should never ignore is repeated disruption at the exact moment you try to focus, pray, or move forward. This one is easy to overlook because it feels like everyday life. Distractions happen, interruptions happen, things come up. But when it becomes a pattern, when it shows up specifically when you're trying to do something important, that's when it becomes a sign. You sit down to focus, and suddenly your phone won't stop buzzing. You try to pray, and your mind becomes unusually scattered. You begin working on something meaningful, and something urgent pulls your attention away. And it doesn't happen randomly. It happens at the right moment, the moment that would have created progress. When I was on the other side, this was one of the simplest but most effective tactics. Not to stop someone completely, but to break their focus. Because focus creates momentum, and momentum creates results. So if you interrupt focus consistently, you interrupt progress without needing any visible resistance. Now here's why this is dangerous. Because it feels normal. You don't question it. You don't confront it, you just adjust to it. You say, I'll do it later, or let me handle this first, or I'll come back to it. But later rarely comes. And even when it does, the same pattern repeats. So over time, important things remain unfinished, not because you can't do them, but because you're constantly being pulled away at the critical moment. Now ask yourself honestly, do interruptions increase when you try to focus deeply? Do distractions feel stronger when you're about to pray or take action? Do important tasks get delayed over and over again for small, unrelated reasons? If the answer is yes, then this is not random, it's a pattern, and patterns must be confronted with intention. So here's what you do differently. Instead of adjusting to disruption, you protect your focus. You become intentional about your time. When you sit down to do something important, you remove distractions before they appear. You silence what needs to be silenced. You create space that cannot be easily interrupted. Because focus is not accidental, it's protected. And once you protect it consistently, the pattern begins to break. Because what used to interrupt you no longer has access. This is how you regain control, not by reacting to distraction, but by refusing to allow it. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the fifth sign, one that shows up in cycles, repeating the same problems in different forms, and keeps people stuck longer than they realize. The fifth sign you should never ignore is repetition. Not coincidence, not a one-time situation, but a cycle that keeps showing up again and again in different forms. At first, it doesn't look like a pattern. It looks like separate problems. A financial issue here, a setback there, a situation that feels familiar but slightly different each time. And because the details change, you don't recognize the structure, but the outcome. It's always the same. You move forward, then something pulls you back. You solve one problem, and another one appears in its place. You think you've finally broken through, and then you're right back where you started. That's not random, that's a cycle. When I was on the other side, this was one of the most effective long-term strategies because cycles don't need to stop you instantly. They just need to keep you looping. As long as you keep repeating the same pattern, you never fully escape it. And over time, something dangerous happens. You begin to expect it. You start saying things like, this always happens, or every time I get close, something goes wrong. And without realizing it, you've identified the pattern. But you haven't broken it, because recognition without action keeps the cycle alive. Now here's what makes this sign so powerful. Cycles often disguise themselves as progress. You think you're moving forward because things are changing on the surface. But underneath, the structure is the same. It's like walking in a circle and calling it a straight line. Now let me ask you something directly. Are you dealing with problems that feel familiar, even if they look different? Do you find yourself restarting areas of your life you thought you had already fixed? Do certain struggles keep coming back, no matter how much effort you put in? If that's happening, you're not dealing with isolated situations. You're dealing with a cycle, and cycles require a different response. You don't just fix the surface problem, you confront the pattern itself. Because if you only address what's visible, the cycle will rebuild in a new form. That's why awareness is critical, because once you see the pattern clearly, you stop treating each situation as separate. You begin to recognize the structure behind it. And once you recognize the structure, you can break it. Not temporarily, but completely. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the sixth and final sign, one of the most overlooked, yet most revealing indicators that something deeper is happening, and it shows up in how you react, not just what happens around you.